Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, let me fix this. How do I fix this? I don't know how to fix this. Oh, hi, Stella. Drinking some water. There we go. Better. Okay. Hello. Sorry guys, I have had a long week. Did I just wake up? No, I woke up a little bit ago, but I had a long week. I worked a lot, so I'm a little tired. That was a quick sighting of Queen Stella. So good to see everyone. I'm just gonna let everyone say hi for a sec before we dive back in. That's my plants. Actually, this plant is fake. This plant is like a cat castle for Stella to jump in. Thank you. Today will be a shorter live. We didn't have as much to read. And yeah. So let's keep going. Let's dive right in. You're joining my family. AB, tell everyone I say hello. Just sat down at dinner and got the notification. Perfect timing. Awesome. I know it looks real, right? I like it because it looks like I don't know. Like the other cat castle I had, it looks so much like a cat castle, whereas this looks like a little tree. It kind of like adds something. Oh, awesome, Annie Hansen. You have fun. Thanks for stopping by. This part did not make me happy. Yeah. This one was just kind of upsetting. Not initially. In the beginning, you get to see this little love story of Tariq and my gosh. Layla. My cat's too chunky for a cat tower. I literally just read this section a half hour ago because I dedicated the rest of my weekend to reading the whole of A Little Life and got very sidetracked. Yes. Always having fun. Awesome. Layla, thank you, Anna Cat Fernandez. We get to see that beautiful, like, little love story. And I feel like, to me, Jordana, it's heavier in a different way, or it's just as heavy in a different way. Because, like, we have this awful story with Miriam Joe where we see this person lose everything. And then we get to Layla's story and we see her family and what they've had to deal with, and the fact that Bobby had lost 2 sons and she lost 2 brothers. And you see her father, who's like a different example of a person of a man we've seen in Afghanistan, who's like, he wants his daughters to get educated. He wants all this good for her and the world for her. And then, unfortunately, history strikes back. There's more fighting and more. It's so sad. I never wanted a relationship to work so bad. Like, they deserve to be happy. We got exactly the opposite. It's just one of the female happy ending. I'll be happy. I'm curious to see if that happens. I'm on the same page. First time here. What book are we referring to? Hi. Welcome. Everyone, let's just welcome our first time member. Today we're talking about part 2 of 1,000 Splendid Suns. We read all of part 1 and we discussed that last week. For this meeting, you should have read all of part 2. I have I caught up, but I have like a few pages that I have to go back and like read again. Maddie, great point. I'm going to read that out loud for everyone. What is with the mothers being so heartbroken in this book? First Nana, now Mama, and they both dump their traumas on their daughters. I mean, in my mind, I kind of can see it. I can understand it in the sense that, like, these poor like, these women had, like, taken, I mean, I don't want to say that. I want to say these poor women have been just at the brunt of, like, experience, like, just taking it all their entire lives. And then they have a being who they know, based on their life and the women around them, that this new child's life is going to be full of a similar sadness and pain. I don't know. I can see it being very heavy. And then, Maddie, I was going to read that. You're right. It's heavy because it's like a mirror with the two little girls of the same age. Not the same history. Boom. Please show the book again. I want to take a pic. There you go. Whoop. 1,000 Splendid Suns. Said it last time, the women in this story have had to endure. Yes, we did talk about that. Intergenerational surviving is not living. One mother couldn't live without her daughter, and the other barely knew her daughter was there. I mean, I think another thing that it's doing is saying, like, unfortunately, the way that this world is, it doesn't matter the privilege that you could have. You could have the privilege of I just had a bottle of water, and I can't find it. It's over there. The privilege of, like, having a family that cares about you and loves you, and still kind of being in the same place. Give me 1 second. Thank you. Honestly, I was in pain for all of these women in this book. It's hard, all of their pain. I love Layla's relationship with her father. It was one of the few bright rays in the storm. I completely agree. And in my mind, I also want to, I want to learn how her father became that way in a society that, or at least from what we've seen of the other men in that society, specifically Miriam Joe's husband, Rashid. How did he become the way he is? How did he become so... I mean, I guess it's because he read a lot of books. I don't know. Honestly, I was... Okay, we read that. Big difference, but both daughters had something missing. Maybe Stella. Completely agreed, Jen. I loved how Bobby unconditionally supported Layla in her education. I thought that was just a lovely thing. And how that was, like, one of his strongest goals for her. Because I think he saw, like, the direct correlation of, like, education and then what eventually could be provided because of it. Whether it be a better life, a better partner. Layla and her father have the best relationship. I wish they had the kind of relationship with my parents. So invested in her future, always tries to do the best for her. I'm just like, that speaks to something about him. Yeah, because you read a lot of books. I think it's just interesting that he was, I think it's a nature versus nurture debate. Perhaps his parents were also progressive and his education helped him realize the importance. I think that could definitely be it. Oh, my mom joined. Hey, Mom. Yeah, I mean, that has to be it. And I think it's just such a cool example of a person in that society that values education and what opportunities that provides to those around him. I thought that was so cool. Oh, and then my heart broke for that scene where he had to pick his 5 books. Layla, her father is a role model of the people recognizing how important education is, no matter if your kid's male or female. I think that's the only difference between Jaleel and Bobby. Miriam had an illusion of what her father was, and Layla had the best father figure. Hey, Pops! My dad is there too. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Can we talk about this really quickly? Can we talk about Layla's relationship with Tariq and how kind of awesome that is, and also kind of how sad it made. I felt so bad for her when they were at the movies. Bobby's such a wonderful personality, but his education was a detriment in the eyes of other men like Rashid. In the eyes of Rashid, it made him weak. But I think that's like he has to say that so that he has something, because he knows he has nothing other than strength if it comes to knowledge. You know? He's like, well, at least that's weak to do that, or that's not a man to. And I'm like, well, you have to say that because you have nothing else. All you have is, I don't know. I loved it when they went and visited the Buddhas, and Lada's father was reminiscing. I Googled the Buddhas to see what they were like, and what was sad when I discovered they had been destroyed. I think that was recently. Nanette, do you know how recently they were destroyed? The old bit, he said. You're on a deserted island. You can have 5 books. Which do you choose? I never thought I'd actually have to. Layla and Tariq's relationship is my favorite so far. It's so innocent and organic, right? It's like a perfect love story in the sense that like they live next to each other. She likes him. They're really close. He beats up those kids for her. I want to see that cartoon scene of her and him walking, her telling him what that other kid did with the balloons, and then him being like, hold my beer. And then going over there. I thought that was just awesome. I actually cried when Leda made him leave, and when he tried to reassure her he'll be back, he was ready to marry her on the spot. It's funny how like this is like giving us hope in like life, like seeing this little love story happen, which is majorly contrasting to the world they're living in. Exactly, like we're seeing this beautiful love story while we know these other things are kind of crumbling and in various states of like falling down around them. I totally agree with Kendra. I love that part, and look to Buddhists too, such a fascinating part of Afghanistan's history. I agree. The fact that the communists advocated women's education was interesting. They learned math, etc., with a lot of propaganda included. And I think that's like the rub. Most people can, for a fact, tell you that your education is a very, very important part of your life. So I think, but I also know like in regimes like that where there is a lot of propaganda, and I think all regimes have propaganda, education is one of the best ways to perpetuate that. Give a little, get a little. I'm going to give you a lot of knowledge, and I'm also going to give you some cool stuff about us, and because of that, you're going to think we're cool. I think it works. I think in time and the environment, they actually viewed education as unnecessary and weakening. Great. Taliban tells one. Oh. Best friends to lovers trope, yeah. I love how his mom was shipping them before they were aware of their feelings. I know, but that's how moms are. I thought that was great. But also, like, I felt bad that there was this other pressure on it when her mom brought it up. She's like, everyone's going to start talking, and you need to be careful. And I'm like, that sucks. Let them be adorable. If I remember correctly from when I read the book last year, the Buddhas being destroyed is mentioned on the book later. In part 2, I believe. Yeah. The fact that part 2 started with Tariq being gone for 2 weeks and Layla barely coping to him leaving permanently right as the part ended, just let them be happy. I know! But that's the thing. It's like we're realizing that the glimmers of happiness or hope or whatever are so short, and then the rest of the life is enduring. It's so... It feels like the first time you get to like catch your breath, and then they're like, nope, you got to start running again. Do you read together certain chapters, or just read the book when you can? Hi, Wise Latina. We read when we can. We read on our own, and then we discuss the book together, like we're doing right now. March 2001. Wow. My mom actually mentioned that she heard of the Balmia Buddhas being destroyed on the news at the time it happened, which is so weird to me. Wow. Mom, Pops, are you guys still on? Do you guys remember anything about that? I'm seeing if my parents are still here. The education was the theme. And that's a cool thing, because we got to see what lack of education, kind of what situations it allowed for Miriam Jo, and how it kind of like pigeonholed her, and then also created this really awful tension in her relationship where her husband was mad at her for not knowing things, but also in that society wanted not to do anything to educate her and expected her to know. It's just this horrible cycle. And then we see the opposite of that. We see Layla with Bobby, who wants her to be educated, wants to give her those opportunities, and wants to see her kind of grow out of or into who she can be fully. And I think that's part of why they leave at the end of that chapter, recognizing that she won't get to do that, And then I think of that, I don't know, for me, I thought a lot of that of my family immigrating, leaving a place they were familiar with to the unknown with just hope. Do you think they'll reunite? Because that's the only thing I need to survive this book. I don't know. Based on the trend of things, things either going really well or not, I actually put that at 50-50. I feel like I could see it being one of those sad things that just never happens again, or something that, one of those beautiful moments of a light in a dark tunnel. I also love how Tariq doesn't let his missing leg make him a victim. Oh yeah, it's pretty cool. People she believed now shouldn't be allowed to have children if they'd already given away all their love to their older ones. This got me. I felt so bad for that family. Because what was really upsetting was seeing how much it affected her mom. Seeing how she was never able to really be the same person to her again. And then there was a sadness in the loss of that relationship, but I think it was a protection. She was I loved those two children so much that I can't do that again. And it felt very I don't know. The possibility of the two of them reuniting is definitely going to be another theme that we keep on seeing from this point onwards. A little bit of hope for Layla, and maybe a motivator for Miriam too. Well said, well said. Exactly, men like Rashid want their women to be docile and uneducated, but get angry when they don't know about politics. How are they going to learn? I appreciated so much that marriage can wait, education cannot. We should make that a thing on Rosende reads. Education cannot. Education waits for no one. Something like that. I also know that when this war is over, Afghanistan is going to need you as much as its men, maybe even more, because the society has no chance of success if its women are undereducated, Layla. I love that, because you can see that he has this wisdom, this knowledge past what's been presented to everything else felt so immediate. Lack of vision. And then that's an entire vision there. And I agree with him to this day. I won't be able to stay for long. Want to share a thought that lingered throughout the whole reading. Please, Vine Queen, go for it. It was jarring in a way, having the snippet in part 1 when Layla's born and the family, they seemed so perfect and whole, and it was so unexpected to see how shattered they were at the start of part 2. I know, that kind of shocked me. But it's kind of like that thing where, no matter what you know about people, you never really know what they're going through. Oh, and I want to know why Jaleel was visiting. How Layla talked about how she saw this man in the car and it was Jaleel. What was going on there? Did they talk about that? I don't remember. I think I need to search more about the history of this book to understand better. I agree too. I think a history lesson is pretty sweet for this book. What was clear to me throughout the whole book is how women in a patriarchal, religious-based society will suffer no matter what. I think that means the entire society will suffer. The minute you stop allowing any citizens to, you start oppressing them and keeping them from flourishing, that's a color in society that's no longer present. And then that means it's working at a deficit. I really feel like if one group suffers in a society, the entire society suffers. I saw someone ask on Discord if we think the mother was a bad mother. By the time I asked myself which mother she was talking about, because it could have been either Nana or Layla's mother. I don't know. I don't know if it's for me to judge. You know? Good and bad are such strong words. I think there are some things they could have done better, and I think there are some things they did pretty poorly. But I don't want to label them as good or bad, because at the end of the day, they're both operating from what they know and trying to endure. But I do think that's a really cool question to come up. Because then you start to question, like, what quantifies someone as bad? Is it someone that doesn't have the power and is making the best of a situation? Is it someone that has all the power and chooses to make it worse for others? I don't know. Despite her social status, whether she's a mother, a wife, sister, daughter, rich or poor, the women are doomed to suffer by the heads of men in power. Unfortunately. What was he doing there? Right? We didn't talk about this yet. Wandering Dreamer 3. Like, what was he doing there? Why did he visit all of a sudden? Did something happen? Did someone get sick? Does he need something? What took so long? You know, I think Miriam mentioned in her part, Jaleel visited once and she refused to meet him. So I think that's the same incident. That's why he's just sitting in the car the whole day. Oh. I think you find out why later on in the book. All right, cool. Thank you, guys. Layla lay there and listened, wishing Mammy would notice that she, Layla, hadn't become Shashid. She was still alive here in her bed with her, that she had hopes in a future. I know, you feel... Because it's like she suffered the pain and loss of two brothers and then also had to suffer the pain and loss of like a mother in a way. Her mother never took her in that way. I think good or bad over something over society's tendency to judge mothers and not seeing them in their full complexity. I agree. Hey, Tessa made it. Jaleel's visit comes up in the end of part 3 before we don't know why he visited. Okay, thank you. All good, Tess. Yeah, I don't think we can define everything is good or bad. Nothing is black and white. Yeah, and I think that's something else that this book is kind of allowing us to do. Like, then again, I'm not feeling bad for Rashid at all. I'm kind of like, that guy sucks. But I think we're just confronting how other people endure in this society where Shashid is another word we use in Hindi. It means martyred. That's so interesting that you're finding so many similarities in language. I think that's so cool. Thank you for sharing, Jordana. I think that's so cool. Yeah, I agree, Ninette. We can't blame the mothers of this story. They are products and victims of society. They're a part of the system which raises them to perpetuate it. That's exactly it. It's all a cycle there. I also think it's interesting that both moms knew their daughters were good people because they both said, "You're a good daughter." Reading the book, I actually felt like I could identify with so much because of the similarities in my own culture compared to the books based on Western culture. That's really cool. I'm really glad that, like, I mean, I think that's so cool. Because it's always interesting, I think, when you find similarities in people and you're like, oh, whoa. And then when you do the math, you're like, oh, wow, I guess either regionally, culturally, religiously, somewhere or the other, there is like a connecting bridge, and it makes sense that people cross that bridge, you know? Like they knew, even though both were struggling, they both raised their daughters to be kind and strong. Oh, that's like really beautifully said. I think they had to. There wasn't really another choice. Yeah, I thought it was just... I gotta fix this. I thought it was just so cool. So I'm trying to remember. Let me look. What else did I want to talk about? Um, Hey, Alexi's back. Between language, some practices, description of trees, nature, so much what I see in my country. Oh, cool. Not too much, Lexi. We've been talking about part 2, like we said we were going to. We've been so far we've kind of dived into the beautiful relationship that is Tariq and Layla. We've talked about Layla's relationship with Bobby and how we think that's like this beautiful anomaly in this society, and it was like a glimmer of hope. And I like to think that if one person, Bobby, could see that future, I like to think there's a bigger group of people that are also fighting for that. We talked about how hard this is for mothers and daughters because of Layla's relationship with her mom, and how her mom carries around the pain of the loss of like her 2 brothers to the point that it gets in the way of her relationship with Layla. And we kind of went into Layla talking about that, her conversation with Bobby, the one at the actual, like the Buddhas in Afghanistan, and then also the conversation at the end of the part where he's like, we have to leave. How did I do on the recap about what we've spoken about so far? I felt like I actually did pretty well. Yeah, I think I did all right. I felt like I had to like write a paper or something. I was like, okay, we talked about this, we talked about this, we talked about this, and then we talked about this overarching thing. And then, are there any themes? Actually, that's actually a really cool question. Are there any themes that we're seeing from the first chapter where we followed Miriam Joe to now where we're following Layla? What are the similarities? Layla knew that her future was no match for her brother's past. They had overshadowed her in life. They would obliterate her in death. Oh, that was such a well-written like thing. When I read that, I was like, ooh. It felt like it was like, shh, you know? I really believe that the books have the biggest power for our soul. Actually, I was talking about that with someone on set recently. They were talking that books are where you learn empathy, where you learn compassion. And that's why banning them is like the worst thing that you can do. That the universe being so cool because they were attacked right when they were ready to leave. That felt but that's how things work. I don't know. Do I take notes on chapters? Sometimes for different books, I'll write in them. This one, I liked feeling, I don't know, I feel like we can talk about this, actually, as a group. What's everyone's process for reading? We'll do that at the end. We'll take like 10 minutes to talk about process for reading. If someone can remind me, I'll say, what did I want to talk about when we had 10 minutes left? If someone can bring that up for me. So we'll come back, Wise Latino. That's a great question. The writing is so simple and devastating at the same time. You suddenly get caught out by a sudden detail, like foot on the roof that still had the sock and shoe on. It killed me, right? And then that's the thing. I think he does a really great job of creating a really vivid and textured, but an environment that you feel that you're perambulating. Like you feel like you're in it. And I have to say, I love that about his writing style. I love that he's able to do that for us. I also think this book and I Am Malala walk hand in hand. It was an awesome read, 1,000 Splendid Suns after reading Malala's story, and I could comprehend more of the history and politics. You know, Vine Queen, that's great. We might put that on the list. I forgot about that book, I Am Malala. She's an incredible person, so I would love to. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to put that in my... The ending was just gut-wrenching. I know. Books have always been an escape for me. You can go anywhere you want without limitations. I agree. The constant backtrip of war is so sad. Then Kabul has bombing in the streets. I know. It's almost like you just can't escape it. It's this perpetual cycle. That I don't think they really... At no fault that these empires keep trying to take over. Women dealing with growing up in a society dominated by men. Different kinds of women, man, and parent-child relationships. Mm-hmm. Some themes I see coming up. All right, thank you. Let's tie them together now. Confinement, resilient, connection between personal, political. I like that. Themes that run through both their lives, I think, are fraught relationship with mothers. Yes, dealing with different types of grief and loss. Because it's sad. It's like not Bobby, what's her mom's name? Layla's mom. What was Layla's mom's name? But Layla's mom is like mourning so much the death of her sons that she like loses the relationship of her daughter, which causes her daughter to kind of mourn the death of the relationship between her and her mother, and like the death of who her mother was before that, while also her father is mourning like the death of his sons, but also like the tremendous change that happened in the woman he loved. Like I thought that was like a really heartbreaking scene when they're at the things and he starts talking about her with such passion and excitement. But like about her in the past and how like he can recognize that the world hasn't been kind to her and like he can like see her, but he misses, you know what I mean? He misses her. That's a big theme, I think. This grief, that's just this generational grief that's been happening. There's a definite connection between the fact that both Miriam and Layla have had their world's life changed forever. Yeah, tried to read. Grief, loss, fighting for future. The quote straight after the attack. On it, the tip of a red bridge poking through thick fog. Yep. I have found a new way of trading these weeks, so we need to talk it for sure. Cool. Grief and yep. Have you noticed the use of tea yet? I've read this book before and not sure what part you're up to. Antonia? No. I have not noticed the use of tea. Would you care to elaborate? Oh, cool. Can't wait to hear it, Dina. It's a quote I feel like I'll already remember. Yeah. Noted for the book. Thank you. Thank you, Maddie. The last part was so horrible when Layla realized that the sound was that she was hearing it and it was already too late. Yeah. Mammy. Mm-hmm. She Who Became the Sun is also a great book from a woman's perspective with her having to deal with fate and trying to succeed. Yeah. Fariba. Yes. Fariba. One could not count the moons that shimmer on the roofs or the 1,000 splendid suns that hide behind her walls. I thought that was so cool. It gave me goosebumps when I read it the first time. I was like, whoa. I also like that. I really enjoy that when the title is mentioned. They mention tea when Mammy rallies a bit and starts wearing blue dresses again. Green versus black for guests. What do you guys mean IG's not playing up? Is it not working? Is it not working? I see people still joining. Huh. It keeps buffering a bit. Okay. All right, cool. Mine keeps hanging. Okay. Okay, that's good. I did say today was going to be a shorter live because we read a shorter section. I want to be done in like 10 minutes. So I think I've learned more about the Taliban and its consequences, the jihad, the Muslims, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan through I, Malala, and 1,000 Splendid Suns than on the news. I think rightfully so. I think it's really hard to learn about places that are being reported on. Okay, it's when Nana is serving Jalil and Miriam tea. It's a motif, I feel. It offers the characters a small part of peace, comfort, despite the constant violent imagery, even though Nana despises Jalil. Interesting. So you're saying it's like, it's something that they all acknowledge and accept. It's like, everything's messed up, but when we have tea, we have tea. I like that. Kind of want some tea. Sometimes I crash, but it's not anyone's fault. For example, for me, it's working perfectly, but today I'll be crashing another person. Reminder, how we take notes on books. Cool. Like you said, the relationship is so cute and fresh. I think the time for tea are often calmest in the novel at the violent exterior. Cool. I want to hear expectations for this part now that we read this much. She who became the sun. Okay. Can someone write that down? Okay. Thank you, guys. So with about 10 minutes left, we want to talk about how we're reading and what why we read the way we read. I know everyone has a different process, and I think that's one of the coolest things when we start to read more. Remember, the goal of this book club was always to read more books. So when we start to read more, we start to kind of develop processes that help us read, remember, bring things up. And that's something I want to continue, but I want to keep reading all these people's comments before we go. I think that's also a tradition we have. Whenever guests come over, we serve tea or coffee to welcome them. So interesting about tea. There's one scene at the end of part 3 where Miriam, we could look back on that too because it's very sad, but tea offers comfort. Miriam, remember that for next time because I think we're reading part 3, but remember that. I'm really interested to see how it progresses with Miriam and Layla's story finally joining, especially since Layla's always craved a mother and Miriam's always craved a child. Interesting. There's something lacking from this book that I feel is due to lack of lived experience. Tell your secrets to the wind, but don't blame it for telling the trees. Oh, that's awesome. I read a lot in one go because this book is really captivating, but I usually read a chapter, I take a break, and then I go back to reading. I use sticky tabs at points that intrigue me or quotes I like. I do a little bit of everything because I'm kind of all over the place. There are days where I'm like this week. This week I didn't have a lot of time to read. And next week I won't either. I'm pretty much, these next few episodes are really big for me. So big for me meaning I'm just in every day. So I have the audiobook really helps. And if there are quotes in something that I like, I try to write them down or I try to just remember them. It doesn't help a lot. The most successful I've been with remembering quotes was when I actually just read with a pencil. Because then I make a little mark, I read something in the lines, and that made it easy for me was when I read with a pencil. But I can't always do that. But I know that one of the things that helps me remember the most is when we start engaging in conversation. Because it's like a memory. Your friends like, remember that time we went to the movies? And you're like, yeah. And they're like, and we saw that movie? And you're like, oh, yeah, and they're like, and remember the popcorn machine was and then we had to, yeah, okay, now I remember. That's how that works for me, generally. It's like, I don't think I have a very, I told Tessa this the other day, I don't think my memories, however it does in my brain, I don't think it's like a file cabinet that's really well organized. I feel like my brain just has a memory room. So it's a room full of memories that every time there's a new one, there's a guy with a little sack and he's like, all right, in the memory room. And then when I'm like, oh, I need to remember this, they're like, ooh, give us a sec. The room's kind of full. And I'm like, why don't we organize it? And the brain's like, no, we got it. This has been working. It's like, no, it hasn't. This is not a good way to do things. And the brain's like, that's okay. We can't remember that. I just think it's very important and intimate. It allows some kind of respite. I think so too. But there is something about it's like a breaking of bread, like that you're consuming something that nourishes you with another person. I kind of want tea now. I might have some tea. I get an ebook and I highlight quotes or even add notes, whether I have a physical version or not, because I cannot bring myself to write on books. I used to be more of a book purist in that, where I was like, I won't write in my books. But lately, I've kind of liked that idea. Because I like the idea of reading a book again 10 years later and seeing what I thought then in the columns. Post-its are great. I read a chapter a day. I can't bring myself to write in it, so I make mental notes. That's great. Hey, Lexi. Hey. Post-its are great. And I think that's something, if we're all trying to read more, which I think is one of the goals, just see things that work for you. And you know what I think is the biggest thing that I learned, I think, a little too late? If it doesn't work for you, I don't care if... I don't care if the coolest person in the world says it should. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. I feel like a lot of my education, I tried to do what was like supposed to work, like taking notes a certain way or writing index cards or doing things that just don't work with the natural flow of how I work. So it was always like a chore to do it. It was always like, oh, I have to do that thing. It was never like, oh, I'm excited for this. So I think part of processing for reading is developing like a process that makes you excited to read, even if it's like, I read 1 page a day. That's a start. Eventually that'll be 2. Eventually it'll be 10. And I think it also depends on the book. There are some books that are really heavy that I'm like, I don't want to read too much of this a day. And there are some books that you start reading and next thing you know, you haven't looked up. It's been 6 hours and you're almost done. And your eyes hurt a little bit and you're sore. That happens. My mind is a mess. I forget a lot of reading when I'm done. I need to take more notes, I think. See, I think that's also the thing. Maddie, you're listening to yourself there. You're like, I forget a lot. Maybe I'll take more notes. Start. If it works, great. And yeah, I tend to forget a lot too. I read the whole thing through first, then I go back, analyze, pick out quotes. See, that feels like a very studious, like solid way to do it. I want to do that one day. I'm lucky that I tend to remember the storyline pretty well even after a while, so I just skim through before the live and then I'm good to go. That's also what I do. I'll look at the beginning of the part that we're about to talk about. I'll look where it ends so I don't speak past that. I'll be like, oh, I can't talk about this yet. Got it. And then, yeah. And then, but I get the benefit, and I think we all do, that we're having this discussion. So when someone remembers something and makes a comment, it's easier for me to go, oh, that's the light bulb. Got it. A website that I like to use to supplement my reading is Lit Charts. It provides some thematic analysis of the book that deepen my understanding. Thank you, Wandering Dreamer. I know when we were doing a lot of our classic books in the early Rosende Reads days, I did use Spark Notes and whatnot, but not to like not read the book. I read the book and then I read what people said about it. They were like, in the first 6 chapters of this book, and we're like, oh, cool. I noticed that. I used to have a little book I'd write quotes in for Rosende Reads books, but now I just tend to read each section and try to make mental notes. Yeah, perfect. As a teen, I feel seen. I like to go back to writing them down. It's nice to look back, but more time consuming and I have less of that. That's the thing. Like, remember, another goal of our book club, anyone that's new, anyone that's joining, it's to take the pressure off of reading. Because I feel like often when you have to read something, there was always a pressure. It was either for an exam, a paper, some sort of completionary necessity. And I'm like, we don't need that. This is because we want to, because it's exciting. And if it doesn't give you life right now, put it down. When it does again, pick it back up. Unfortunately, when I watch a movie, I memorize it immediately. I literally can tell what happened in a movie I saw once many years ago. I am like that sometimes. And I feel that with books, though, like really good ones, it doesn't take much to remember, and it almost feels like it doesn't feel like something you remembered happened to someone else. It feels like it happened to you. You were like, I'm trying to think of like, what was a moment of betrayal we read in one of our books where I felt like it happened, like that person betrayed me. You know? I discovered Kindle for my week, and it's so cool because when I read, I can put evidence, some quotes. I can take a. Can I see that? Remind like I need to know more about these things. Oh, cool. I usually sit and read a chapter at a time, jot down quotes like that, but the rest I just try to remember. Perfect. I've read this book twice already. In this case, I have no clue what's happening after the first half of part 3. I find very interesting because that's when really heavy content begins. Oh boy, there's heavier stuff along the way. In the memory room. The best description. I'm more of a read it all in one go, like a maniac kind of gal. Love that. You can't write in the book. I read very slowly. I always forget what I've read so soon after because my memory's a mess. I read this book last year and that's why I'm not engaging right now. All good. I find that sometimes I focus too much on looking for good quotes rather than the book when in reality the good quotes normally jump. Yeah, I feel like good quotes are just obvious. They just are like, hey, you're welcome. 100% I was taught to take notes at school, but it never worked. I need to make doodles, rhymes, suddenly bad. Yeah, and that's the thing, like, it's about finding your own process. Grades are always so bad. I didn't know I had ADHD when I discovered I did. I was like, now I get, dude, same. Like when I discovered that, I was like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense. God, I was really trying to fight uphill, wasn't I? You know? I'm just catching up really fast now. Hey, Maria, you made it. I know, heavier, crazy. I love that our group has a lot of teachers in it. That makes me really happy. Oh my God, we had to read this as a group for my uni class, and we were all in utter shock towards the end. Prepare yourselves. Okay. I'm like, I need to read to stay in a comfort mood with relaxed, nobody around, but everyone's always like, hey, Thina, do this. I feel the same way. It reminds me of that, kind of, because it's like hard. Like, I've tried to bring books to set, and sometimes if the book is amazing, you can do it, like if it really pulls you, but that means I'm not like focusing on work, which is bad. So I have to bring a book that doesn't bring you in too much that you lose where you are, but a book that engages you enough that you lose where you are. It's happened a few times and it's great, but other than that, if it's too busy, you can't, you're constantly like, come on, I want to come back. All right. We did part 2. Okay, hold on 1 second. Can't function if I don't start off each day with a little bit of reading at least. Nobody get between my books. Yeah. Too attached too quickly, too emotional. I usually read on my way to work, but parts of this book are just too heavy for that. I would not have stopped because... See, I will listen to like audiobooks and stuff. One thing I started doing, because I mentioned this last time, if you're trying to do a new workout regimen, if that's one of the goals you set for this year, one of the goals you've recently set for yourself, I find that listening to an audiobook helps you kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I would say, like, before you go to the gym or before you work out, you plan what you're going to do. I would write it down so you don't have to think about it. You can just look and be like, oh, that's next. And then you listen to your book. So the whole time you're doing this like physical activity that should be tiring you, but you're focused on something else. To me, that's the trick the mind. So we're at 179. I want to go to like 250. Perfect. That's 44 and then 20, 60 pages. Yeah, we're going to do that. Yeah, and you know what I think it is? I think it's just like, just making the time. Like, everyone has a couple minutes here and there where you can throw in a little bit of reading. And, we did exactly that. We promptly went to the pub right after the lesson. That feels right. And now I want a beer. Is that weird? It's like really early. Yeah, I know. Someone said pub. I'm kind of like, hey, Tess, you want to go to the pub? Do you? Yeah. What a yes would be really exciting. Yeah. Okay, so, thank you for this discussion. I'm going to say this one more time. I'm going to say this pretty much every live when we read this book. As we know and as we seem to be finding out, the book does get heavier. So again, this book should not get in the way of anyone's mental health. If you're finding this book to be too close to home, to touch something that you just don't want to deal with, whatever issue, even if you're just like, I don't like it, you can stop reading, you can put it down. It's because food and drink are life. That's what happens. One day we'll do a Rosende Reads pub crawl. Oh my gosh. That would be cool. We do it like in Paris where a bunch of writers famously wrote. That would be sick. Like I said, please don't let this book get in the way of mental health. If you do need to take a break, if you feel like it's too much, take that break. Take care of yourselves. For those that feel that we can continue, so we must. So we finished part 2, which means we will be looking into part 3. So that's chapter 27 is what begins part 3. We're going to read 10 chapters. You're going to read up to, not through, up to chapter 37. So 27 to 37. So when you turn and your page looks like this, stop reading. So that would be cool. I'm in Chicago for Rosende Reads Pub Crawl. Oh, that'd be sick. That's what I'm saying. You know, it's got to be like a thing. We'll take some time. We'll take some time to plan it. Up to 37. Up to 37. 37. Because 27 is where we start. Part 3 is the beginning of is 27. Up to chapter 37. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining. This has been another amazing discussion. I can't wait to continue reading this really, really lovely book. So as you continue into this week, continue questioning things. Continue evolving, continue growing, continue learning, and continue to be positive forces of change in your communities. The world really needs that. So I'll see you guys next week. I'll post earlier when we're going to do the live, around the same time, most likely. But until next time.